I'm Stephanie Weiss, Education Director for AGRIP. Today we're going to hear about understanding and responding to First Amendment audits. You'll hear from 3 pool members. They're going to share stories, insight, and practical takeaways to help public entity pools support their members who deal with First Amendment audits. They're going to provide some insight on how pool governing body members, who often are local elected officials, can navigate First Amendment audits. And they're going to share some personal stories along the way. We're going to start off with a story about an auditor visiting a local entity. And this is a pretty difficult story. The auditor really created a difficult situation for a local staff member who had to deal with the auditor. And the situation was so challenging that the local official ended up filing a workers' comp claim. Now, this story is an example in the extreme, but we're sharing it today because we want you to know what can happen. And so you can think about how to prevent this type of situation through de-escalation, through clear signage of public and non-public areas, and by being ready and prepared for a First Amendment auditor coming to your community. So thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you gain some practical insight and some understanding of the motivations and tactics of First Amendment auditors.
I'm Sam Light. I'm Deputy Executive Director and General Counsel for CIRSA, which is the Colorado Intergovernmental Risk Sharing Agency, which is the municipal pool in the state of Colorado. We were formed in 1982. We have about 297 members. That's about 90% of the municipalities in the state of Colorado. We provide property and liability coverage as well as workers' compensation coverage for our members. To give you a sense of our size, our total assets are just below 100 million for 2023. And I'll turn it over to Matt.
Good afternoon. My name is Matt Peter. I am the interim executive director of Local Government Insurance Trust, the insurance pool for towns, cities, counties, and sponsored entities in the state of Maryland. We provide property and liability coverage for our members as well as excess coverage. We've been in existence since 1987. We're currently up to 194 members with total assets of approximately $79 million.
I'm Kim Santon. I'm the Executive Director of North Bay Schools Insurance Authority. We're a schools pool in Northern California with regional members. And we provide lines of coverage for property and liability, work comp, and some employee benefits. We have total assets of around $90 million. We have 14 members, and we were established in 1979 and going on our 45th year.
You may not be an entity that's experienced a First Amendment audit yet, but it's quite the trend around the United States. Thought I would start with a definition of what a First Amendment audit is. It's basically the practice by which a citizen visits public offices or public buildings to film local entity staff doing their work in public spaces. We're going to talk about stories from our own pools involving our experiences with First Amendment audits. We'll talk a little bit about objectives of the auditors and how our staffs have reacted. And we'll also later in the presentation provide you with tips on how you can manage effectively and hopefully successfully a visit from a First Amendment auditor.
You know, we're all here gathered in this group from California, Denver, into Maryland because at the AGRIP Governance Conference, I had a telephone call related to what is a First Amendment auditor. We have one on our campus at our district office, and we don't know what they are. So I happened to be sitting next to Matt Peter, and I just turned around and asked, does anybody know what a First Amendment auditor is? And he was able to assist and share resources and documents to the point that by the time I got home from the governance conference, we had a virtual training for all of our members, very well attended by Monday. And with his assistance and our general counsel, taking some of those slides, amending them for our school districts. For a while, I believe that our school districts thought we were immune from these audits. We had heard about it, but it was kind of a shock when we had someone appear. And it was a shock for our members because they have been trained to check people in, even the district office. With that, they had been trained for security and safety reasons that they asked for people's name and ID. So there was quite a shock to the way that the districts had to think. Again, safety was really on their mind. We did have an auditor go to a district, and it really shook up the whole district office to the point that the employee that made the prime time on the YouTube channel ended up filing a work comp claim and actually having very violent harassment made to her personal phone, her family's personal phones. They knew her address. They posted the address on the YouTube channel in the comments. There were threats that they were coming around the corner to violently hurt her. And, you know, it was very traumatic for the district and this person. We were able to get that video removed. It generated about 290,000 hits and comments from all over the country. And because of the violent nature and some of the public comments, the video was removed. And it was not an easy process. To take that further with the AGRIP CEO conference, some other pools in California had visits from the auditor as well. And because the information was shared with us, we continued the sharing. And we passed the slides on. We continue to pass the slides for each member in each pool to customize for their benefit. We've also shared the training, and our general counsel has provided virtual trainings to other pools in California too, and mostly related to school pools. So, you know, the sharing and the problem solving with our peers has been beneficial in this area. We've shared what kind of signage that we'll put up, and we'll talk about that later. But Matt and Sam will transition and talk about how we can best handle and manage when a First Amendment auditor appears at a member office.
Kim hit on an interesting phenomenon that I think it's more recent that First Amendment auditors have been visiting school grounds. We have had many, many visits by First Amendment auditors to our membership. In fact, we have claims history and claims experience with First Amendment auditors going back at least 10 years. And the phenomenon started in Colorado with First Amendment auditors filming police officers doing their jobs in public places and then putting those videos online. And over time, we've kind of seen a trend where they're showing up in different places. Well, it started with filming officers doing their work out in public places. Auditors began showing up in or near police buildings. They've shown up at city council, town board, and other governing body meetings to provide public comments with their video machines going, all in view of putting these videos up on YouTube or other social media sites. We've also seen YouTube videos from audit visits in parks, at festivals, inside municipal facilities such as libraries and rec centers. We, in our experience in Colorado, we have both what we call frequent flyers. We're quite adept at preparing First Amendment audit videos and visit a number of municipalities around the state. And then we have one-timers as well. As Kim mentioned, the First Amendment auditor can certainly be a stressor for staff. It's very disconcerting to have someone visit the workplace and have a camera rolling inches from your workstation. And in fact, it's probably true that some First Amendment auditors can be less than courteous, and sometimes they're arriving with their film camera running with the professed intent of trying to push people's buttons to see if they can get a reaction. In legal terms, what this sometimes translates into, unfortunately, is a civil rights claim or a violation of First Amendment rights particularly if the First Amendment auditor believes that they have been wrongfully detained, that they have wrongfully had their video equipment taken, or that they've been retaliated against for exercising their First Amendment rights. Matt is going to talk more about that, but we certainly learned in Colorado with some of our claims, unfortunately, a little bit the hard way, that these First Amendment auditors, while they can be less than courteous sometimes, many of them know exactly where the lines are drawn with respect to First Amendment rights and obligations. And they can show up with the professed intent of getting very close to that line, but without stepping over it. So one of the things in Colorado that we appreciate very much is the opportunity with other pools to share insights and wisdoms and the practices and techniques that auditors use, and of sharing stories so we all understand where the lines are drawn and what we can do to avoid bad situations involving First Amendment auditors.
Our experience with auditors is not nearly as long as what they've experienced in Colorado, at least from the pool's perspective. They really first started to appear on our members' radars about 3 years ago. And we spent all of last year doing training, crisscrossing the state, bringing it to our members. Because the one thing that we've realized is that there's auditors everywhere. As Sam said, there's homegrown auditors, there are frequent flyers, there are folks who are doing it they're just sort of one and done. But they're going anywhere and everywhere that they can. It doesn't matter how small the town is, doesn't matter how large it is, how rural or suburban it is. It is incredibly easy for someone who wants to do an audit to figure out where any particular local government has offices, has a location. I've taught this class to plenty of people who are public works folks, and they say, Matt, well, nobody's going to bother recording me while I do my job. I don't work in an office building. Nobody's coming to audit me. I said, well, if you think that, good luck, because auditors do show up to do audits of public work professionals while they're outside doing their work. You can see it in the videos online. You can also see it if you speak to some of our members who have had to deal with auditors. We had one particular code enforcement officer for one of our small towns, had an auditor follow him around for 4 hours while he went and did inspections of apartments in town. Auditor was very respectful, didn't try going in anywhere he wasn't allowed, but the second the employee came back having finished his inspections, the auditor was right there on his heels, 6 or 7 steps behind. So you can't think that this is a phenomenon where it just involves your folks who are inside. Just as likely that they're going to audit your employees who are working outside. Now, luckily at Legit, our claims experience is rather small with them. We have had lots of audits here, but at this point, we have only had 3 of the audits that have resulted in claims, although there are plenty of videos up there involving local government employees from the state of Maryland who are now not very happy that their videos are out there. And although their conduct and responses might be questionable, there's certainly nothing that rose to the level of a violation of anyone's rights. So luckily, our claims history hasn't been all that much with regards to these issues. So with that little bit of background from the 3 of us, let's talk about the First Amendment. In a prior life, I was an attorney. I spent 20 years defending primarily law enforcement officers and corrections officers and doing employment litigation. If you had told me when I graduated from law school I'd ever be doing work related to the First Amendment, I would have told you you were crazy, because the First Amendment is complex. It is not an easy topic. There's a lot of different standards, a lot of different tests, a lot of different analysis that goes into things. But plain and simple, the part of the First Amendment that we need to talk about is the part that says, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or the press. As I said, I spent most of 2023 crisscrossing the state teaching this class, and people are like, what the heck does videotaping have to do with freedom of speech or the press? You know, and what I have to explain to people is videotaping is at the heart of the First Amendment these days. What auditors do is they consider themselves to be journalists. They are citizen journalists. They don't need to work for a newspaper. They don't need to work for a media outlet or anything like that. They are simply individuals going out and gathering information that they are prepared to share with someone else. And the Supreme Court has told us that that is at the heart of what the First Amendment is designed to protect, because all we're doing is sharing information, which is in some ways, in many ways, particularly important in a democracy like ours. So where do they like to go? Auditors will go anywhere and everywhere. They like sidewalks. They like police departments. They like school board meetings, public meetings. They like libraries. They love to go into publicly owned parking lots, such as a police department or county building. There's nothing that makes some employees more upset than seeing somebody randomly walking through a parking lot taking video of their license plates, or standing next to the window of their driver's side door and talking about what they can see inside of someone's car. It is really unnerving for a lot of people and results in an employee contacting law enforcement, which is really what a lot of auditors want to happen, as we'll talk about a little more as this class goes on. But it's not always necessarily something like a government property that they're going to, a local government property. They like to do audits sometimes at places like like the post office, anywhere where they can potentially upset individuals who think, well, I don't want to be recorded. You shouldn't be recording me. Let's call the police. And then the police get involved, which is what a lot of auditors are looking to do. As I said a moment ago, recording videos is largely protected speech. And as we talk about that, the first thing that you really need to understand is that the second you walk out your front door in the morning, you are basically telling the world that they have the right to film you. Nobody needs your permission to put you on film for an audit that they are conducting, right? It doesn't matter if you're walking around with your 2-year-old, you're walking around by yourself. Nobody needs your permission to film, right? As I said, videotaping is considered nothing more than information gathering, which the Supreme Court has told us is at the heart of the First Amendment. I have had people during the classes that I teach tell me, well, Matt, they don't belong to the media. They're not a journalist. They're not a reporter. Well, the reality is the law recognizes them essentially as a member of the press because they claim to be out gathering information, and that's all that they are doing. And courts have at this point recognized, as we all know, the ability of individuals to record public meetings. Our law enforcement officers have been recorded for a very long time, fire personnel, and all auditors are really doing is recording town personnel from publicly accessible areas. And that is an important point that we'll talk about more later in the class, is that they are recording personnel viewable from publicly accessible areas. And again, doesn't matter that you're not assigned an inside job. If you are working public works or park staff, just as likely that they're going to come and audit you as they are somebody who might be working an office job. With that, I'll turn it over to Sam.
As the last slide indicated, the courts have held that the right of bystanders to film individuals in public is protected by the First Amendment. In Colorado, we also have some legislation that addresses this issue. So I wanted to get on your radar as well to check whether you're in a state where the right of citizens to record and the right of individuals to engage in citizen journalist activities are also protected by state statutes. For example, here in Colorado, our statute recognizes the general right of citizens to report incidents involving police. It also created a cause of action for liability against peace officers if they, without appropriate cause, interfere with the citizen's right to report. Now, that doesn't mean that the officer cannot provide an order to step back or move somewhere else where they're not interfering with police operations, but they cannot tell a citizen that they are prohibited from recording the police doing their work in public places. One of the other questions that we get when we help our members deal with visits from First Amendment auditors has to do with their filming within a public building. And the question becomes, well, aren't they trespassing if they're not here for a legitimate public purpose, or they're not here for some governmental service? Aren't they trespassing if they're just here filming? And the answer to that is absolutely not. The courts have recognized that the public areas of public buildings are public spaces open to the public. And you kind of say, phew, that's a lot of public, but that's the whole point of the First Amendment and these protections. So there's no basis to tell a person that they're trespassing if they're in the open area of a public building during business hours. And if we break that down and think about it, what may have given us reason to have that thought in the first place is simply that they have a recording device with them. And merely having and using a recording device in a public place is not grounds for trespassing. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, there's also no requirement that the visitor demonstrate that they're for official business. We'll talk later a little bit more about the concept of letting auditors alone just to do their recording. But sometimes the visitor will come in with the camera on the selfie stick and they'll be roaming around, and they may not be looking for a governmental service. We may ask them, can we help you? Do you need to find some staff's office, or is there some request or paperwork that we can provide? And the First Amendment auditor will say, no, I'm just here to record. And the response to that ought to be, that's fine, as long as you're in public areas. We don't need to require, and we can't require that they be there on official business. To the citizen journalist, the business they're there for is to hold public officials accountable to their understanding of what their First Amendment rights are. So some key takeaways here: the courts have said that the public can record in any public building and in any public place. Generally telling the auditor that you can't record here is not an appropriate response. However, first responders can request that persons move back when they're filming so that they're not interfering with operations of first responders. One last point here is these are all general legal principles. You're obviously, in working through your training for your members and addressing questions of your own members, you're going to want to consult with attorneys who are experts within your state and within your federal court jurisdiction and look at the details of any situation that you have. But these are some key takeaways and things that we've been training our members on in Colorado about addressing visits into public buildings. So with that, I'll turn it back to Matt to talk more about the motivations of auditors.
So why on earth would anybody want to go into a government building with a camera and spend 2 hours recording people? One of the most popular questions I get, Matt, I work in a clerical position sitting behind a counter. I push paper all day. Why does anybody want to talk to me about what I do? Why do they want to videotape the whole transaction? It doesn't make a lick of sense. You know, working in this topic area for the last 2 years or so, I still don't get it. You know, this quote, which I think is courtesy of Sam, I do want to thank Sam. He's shared his materials with me. They've been a great help in me even modifying my own program. But auditors will tell you that they have no interest or intention of breaking the law, that they are all about freedom and the Constitution. Why do they conduct a First Amendment audit? Well, what they'll tell you is, I want to make sure that this local government's going to honor my right to videotape, everyone's right to videotape. So we're going to test these public employees and see if they know that I have a First Amendment right to videotape wherever I want in publicly accessible areas. We're going to test also law enforcement. Does law enforcement understand that I can't simply be seized or detained because I'm videotaping and I've made somebody unhappy? I've ruffled some feathers. That is not a justification for seizing someone simply because they are videotaping. Finally, there's potential 14th Amendment issues associated with conducting audits and making sure that someone gets all the due process that they are entitled to. Many First Amendment auditors will also tell you they want to make sure that local government officials, whether they are elected officials or employees, that they are being held accountable, that by videotaping people doing what they do in their native workspace, It promotes transparency and accountability. I'm not quite sure how it does that while you're watching somebody just do their routine job day in and day out. But that is what auditors will try to tell you. All right. They'll tell you that I'm all about the Constitution. It's our goal to make sure that we are educating people. But I will tell you that there's an auditor, I've seen multiple videos, and I want to say he's from California. He focuses on education. He wants to teach people about the First Amendment. And you know what he does when he does his audits? He doesn't embarrass anybody. He doesn't question anybody's intelligence. He doesn't insult them. When somebody says, "Excuse me, sir, you can't videotape here," he takes a few minutes. He's got a stock response. And by the time he's done, everyone understands what the First Amendment is about and why he's there. Do you know what? If you go to his videos, he's got no followers. He's not making any money off his videos because there's no entertainment value there. In many ways, it's kind of like watching paint dry. For the lawyer like me, I kind of get excited watching it because he's someone who's taking his time to do it the right way.
First Amendment auditing, in one way of looking at it, is big business. If you are on YouTube or other social media sites, there are a lot of auditors. There's a lot of competition among auditors to get views. And as Matt said, if the video has some controversy or some excitement to it, that's going to get more views. The compensation for social media work is dynamic, but in doing some research, just to give you a sense of this big business aspect of First Amendment auditing, YouTube content creators, depending on the source that you look at, earn about 1.8 cents per view, or that's about $1,800 for 100,000 views. So if you're a successful auditor with a lot of followers and a lot of views, then you can make some pretty good money. Just to give you an example, we in Colorado had a auditor who was very active a number of years ago and had a lot of followers and did road trips where he would visit groups of municipalities around the state of Colorado and then go out of state and visit groups of municipalities in other states. And at one point in time, he had almost 500,000 subscribers. And so it certainly can be big business from that perspective. I'm going to transition now and build a little bit more on some of the free speech issues that Matt talked about and address a more specific topic that we deal with quite frequently in Colorado. And that is the phenomenon of First Amendment auditors appearing at city council, town board, or other governing body meetings with their camera rolling and filming their interaction with the council or the board or the governing body during the public comment period of the public meeting. And this is a dynamic where rules of decorum seem to go out the window. And the question that we get in helping our members through this is, what are they allowed to say? What potential restrictions, if any, are there that we can impose upon what people are saying during public comment period, particularly when they're saying things that are obscene or using foul language or engaging in personal attacks? In working through this issue with our members, we encourage them to remember to step back and take a deep breath. And yes, it can be very unfortunate to be on the receiving end of some less than courteous comments, but we need to remember that the public comment period of most public body meetings is one of the highest forms of protected First Amendment activity. For public comment periods during a city council meeting, that's when the citizens are there thinking that they're talking to their elected officials, petitioning their elected officials with thoughts and grievances that they have. And there really aren't any restrictions on that speech. Now, again, that's a general comment based on Colorado law and Colorado experience. You may be in a state where you have additional leeway to set rules about what people say during public comment period. But in general, the First Amendment protects free speech rights of individuals. And during the public comment period of public meetings, that's where free speech protections, particularly from the point of view of the auditor, are at their highest. Sometimes staff at our member entities will ask, well, can they actually use curse words? Can they engage in profane or vulgar speech? within our federal circuits, the courts have said that there is First Amendment protection even for using profanity. That doesn't make it nice, it doesn't make it courteous, but in terms of a liability risk that you'll want to think about and work through within your own pools and in working with your own members, is remember that profanity itself does not equal a situation where you can tell someone they have to leave the meeting or shut down their comments simply because of the use of profanity. Auditors often use rude or vulgar or baiting language to elicit a response. And if we're mad about their use of rude or vulgar language, we'll certainly be mad at them if they attempt to parlay that into a First Amendment claim. But if we retaliate against them or we ask the security staff to remove them from the room because of the viewpoint of what they're saying, or a simple passing use of profanity, then we don't want to be doing that. And here in Colorado, we remind our members not to remove someone solely for the use of profanity. Now, not all speech is protected by the First Amendment, but the takeaway there is that the protections are very broad and the exceptions are very, very narrow. The types of unprotected speech include epithets directed at the person that are inherently likely to cause a violent reaction and that play no role in the expression of ideas. In Colorado, in our federal courts, they've developed the concept of what's called a true threat. And a true threat is speech that incites a person to imminent violence or puts a person in fear of imminent harm to themselves or someone else there. First Amendment auditors, most of them are very, very sophisticated on this issue, and they know how to make a comment that's going to get someone's ire up, but they're not making speech that constitutes an imminent threat. The Constitution also does not protect obscene speech, but that should not be confused with profanity. The use of a curse word in and of itself is not obscenity, at least in Colorado under our jurisprudence. So we remind elected officials, though it may seem inappropriate and inconsistent with proper decorum to use an F word, that's typically going to be protected speech. I'm going to share a real example out of Colorado involving First Amendment auditing at a public body meeting. So you'll have an opportunity to watch a video here as part of the presentation of a First Amendment auditor who visited a small community in Colorado and stepped up to the podium during the public comment period with his cameras running. When you watch the video, you'll see that he started with some odd comments right at the get-go, and then things escalated from there. And after using some curse words and the temperature in the room rising, he was eventually removed by the police. This First Amendment auditor was one of our frequent flyers, and we've actually, in Colorado, had almost 24 claims involving the individual. Some of those claims were ones where our members did make a misstep, and there was some liability exposure for the member and for us as a pool concerning First Amendment rights. And other ones, we've had some success in defending claims of claimed violations of First Amendment rights involving the same auditor. So after you watch the video, you'll see how some of the tips that we suggest during this presentation will come in handy, including not having a person removed from the meeting simply because of the use of a curse word, that recognizing that we can control the tone and temperament, and it might be better and not to try and match a First Amendment auditor tone for tone or to exercise power as a blunt instrument, but rather just to let the First Amendment auditor finish their comments and their filming and then move on to the next person during the public comment period.
My name is Eric, and I live inside my body.
I think we need a better address than that.
Doesn't get better address than
Okay.
this body right here.
All right.
My name is Eric, and I live inside my body. And I'm not from Rush, so you should be ashamed of yourselves that I'm even here tonight. The reason why I'm ashamed of you guys is because you're giving Colorado a bad name. You're giving Colorado because while some people are concerned about a council person's personal agenda, Is there one among you that does not have a personal agenda? You have to be honest with yourselves if you're going to be honest with us. And that woman, just like all of you here, put your yard signs with your pictures out there and said, come talk to me, vote for me. I'm going to listen to you, and I'm going to be your voice. You can't silence her voice. I don't know what the fuck is wrong with you people, but fuck the police. It's
can you-
absolutely protected speech. Excuse me, I'm speaking. You are to listen to me, period.
If you don't behave, I'll cut you off.
If you cut me off, that would be a terrible thing for you.
Really?
Yes? Are you silencing my speech, man?
Not yet.
You need to address this council with respect.
I don't have to
We-
fucking address you with nothing.
Yes.
Say, you work for me. You work for these people. And if you don't like the word fuck, then that's too bad. You shouldn't have taken the job.
I think we're done.
I'm sorry, am I being removed from the podium?
You are.
Am I being removed from the building? Am I being arrested?
No, you're just being removed.
I object to this unlawful silencing of my speech.
With that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt, who's also going to share some thoughts and a video involving some experiences with his pool.
As Sam was saying just a few moments ago, for a lot of auditors, it comes down to, they're not saying anything that is profane. They are getting close to a line. They're really trying to push your buttons. When an auditor shows up in any given government building, he or she may interact with 20 to 30 people, depending on how big your organization is. The whole thing about an auditor is they don't need to hit 100% of the time. They need one person to overreact, and that enough can be YouTube gold. We had an auditor who had traveled to Charlestown the day before, been engaged in some activity, videotaping on private property, and had been arrested. And he went to town hall the next day to find out what had gone on at a meeting, was interacting with staff who was dealing with him just fine. But unfortunately, one of their elected officials didn't appreciate the auditor, the fact that the auditor had come to town and had, as far as the elected official seemed to be concerned, making a nuisance of himself, because it really drives home what exactly some auditors are trying to do in terms of pushing buttons. Because once you push buttons and you get somebody to overreact, that's when you find yourself with a claim. That's where you find yourself involved in litigation. That's where, the money that Sam talked about you can get from YouTube is dwarfed by the amount of money you can potentially get for a claim. So enjoy this video.
Where are you from, sir?
Me?
Yes.
I don't answer questions.
You don't answer questions. So you just ask questions. Sir.
You work for me.
I work for you?
You do.
Are you a citizen of town of Charlestown?
I need to live here to get business from you guys?
Oh, do you have a proof of residency?
How did I put in a FOIA request with this town if I don't live here?
You know why.
Do I not have access to this?
You know why.
I have to live here to get services from you? Is that what you're telling me? What if I wanted to buy a house here? Here we go. You want to get tough again? Are you fucking serious? Dude, are you kidding me? Are you serious? Guys, look at this. Look at this. That's assault. That's assault. He's assaulting me.
You're interrupting.
He's assaulting me.
You're interrupting town.
Get your hands off of me.
Come on.
Get your hands off of me
Out the
now.
door. Out the door.
Get your hands off of me now.
Out the door.
All right, so what do we want to do to make sure that we don't end up like the elected official in the last video we saw? What do we want to do? Well, you want to meet them with kindness, all right? Or you just want to not interact with the auditor. Let them be. To me, those are the two different things that two different options that you have. Please avoid saying anything to the auditor like you can't record here. You can't videotape me without my permission. Auditors love phrases like that because they immediately start talking into the camera, questioning your intelligence. They're going to be able to belittle you to their followers, saying that you don't understand basic constitutional principles, yet you work for a local government. All right. Don't demand or try to take their equipment from them. All right. If you're patient towards them, what you'll find with a lot of auditors when they show up at a government building, there, as I said a few minutes ago, there may be 20 or 30 people there. There may be multiple offices, multiple departments. They're going to get a sense pretty quickly when they show up in a particular space. Am I going to get anything here? And if they don't think they're going to get anything, they're going to move down the hall to see if there is somebody else. One of the best examples we have here is we had an auditor show up in one of our small towns. They killed him with kindness. He talked to about 4 different people when he came in the building. Nobody gave him anything. He left. Later that day, within 30 minutes, there was another government building, showed up. He hit the jackpot there. If you remain civil, they just most likely, as I said, they're going to move on. If they continue to linger and they're talking to you, please try to use de-escalation techniques. Try to not answer any of the provocative questions or nonsensical questions they might ask. I've had an auditor ask one of our folks, well, what's your favorite flavor of Gatorade? While they're trying to argue about whether or not he can videotape children under the age of 5 who are trying to get passports in a local government building. Please do not fall for their baited comments either. They would love to try to talk with you about the First Amendment. Understand that these people who are conducting these audits, they're studying the First Amendment, they're reading up on it, they know what they can do in terms of the audit, and they have a working knowledge of the First Amendment. For so many of us out there listening today, think about it. When was the last time you even thought about the First Amendment? Was it sometime your senior year in high school, some college class you took somewhere along the line? Is it really something that you want to get involved with somebody? My recommendation, kill them with kindness, meet them with kindness, respectfully disengage. They will try telling you you're a government employee, you have to talk to me. No, I don't have to talk to you. I have to help you with government services if you're looking for them. If you want to ask me my favorite color Gatorade, I don't have to answer that. Right? You want a form, I'll get it for you. You want to ask me how to do X, Y, or Z, I'll explain it to you. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Sam, who's going to talk about some steps you can take with regards to your physical properties to prepare for an audit.
The time to deal with your physical layout in relation to a successful First Amendment audit is not the time when the auditor is on site with their camera rolling. Whatever type of buildings or facilities you have, you want to give some pre-thought and some pre-planning to what does this look like to an auditor? What is this building? What are our offices? What does this public space look like to a person when they come in with a camera and want to roam around throughout your building? With that perspective in mind, consider whether there's any physical changes that you need or want to make or that are warranted regarding the layout of publicly accessible spaces. If you have buildings and offices where there's a mix of public spaces that are not clearly separated from the private areas, make sure you clearly sign and designate those areas with signs such as employees only beyond this point or private offices do not enter. And make sure you're consistent in how you treat those spaces. If you allow some of your citizens or constituents or customers to roam anywhere throughout the building, the time the First Amendment auditor visits is not the first time to be telling them that they cannot be going to some other place that citizens are allowed to go. In helping set up appropriate boundaries and send the right messages to visitors, consider using physical features to limit or restrict access. It takes your staff out of the crossfire in terms of a difficult interaction by having to tell someone they can't go somewhere, or perhaps even more problematic, step in front of them and tell them you can't come back here. Use stanchions or bollards or signage. If it's a layout where a door would be helpful, even a door to help separate the public from private spaces. Another issue we get, particularly for public-facing staff and a front counter, sometimes the auditor comes right up to the front counter, has their camera rolling, and you're thinking, are they filming what's appearing on my computer screen just over my shoulder? Or are they filming what's in that stack of papers that I have next to me on my desk? We need to recognize that it's our obligation to protect what we consider to be non-public information from being intentionally or inadvertently filmed by a First Amendment auditor. So for your public-facing staff at the front counter, if they see a First Amendment auditor coming in the door, they might want to do a quick check to make sure the confidential paper's out of the way. If their computer screen is right there visible to the public, hopefully it's a screen that they can turn to the side, or they can lock on sleep mode so that private information is not viewable to members of the public. And with regard to staff that deals with First Amendment auditors, dealing with these First Amendment auditor folks is not for everyone. And as was mentioned at the outset of the presentation, can be very stress inducing. And it's not something that happens to staff every day. So as part of your planning to deal with the eventual First Amendment audit visit that you're going to get, talk about who are the appropriate staff members. Identify those supervisors who can be called upon to step in when things are escalating. Talk about what particular departments might need additional help, such as training or coaching and support, and make sure that staff knows that they are supported, that there are people there to help them, and also emphasize their right to step away from a difficult situation. If a First Amendment auditor is in their face and being rude, the staff should know that they have the ability to tell that person, I need to step away for a moment, or I need to see if someone else can help you. They should never also second guess their own perceptions of their own safety. If a staff member is feeling unsafe when a First Amendment auditor is raising their voice or asking difficult questions or engaging in other bad behavior, staff should always feel comfortable that they can step away from that interaction, give it an opportunity to de-escalate. Not all areas that are owned by public entities are public. The law recognizes that certain areas can be out of bounds and can be off limits. So as part of your planning, make sure you identify which buildings or parts of buildings are accessible to the public, and train your staff on which areas are public in addition to which areas are private, because that'll give them the tools they need to direct First Amendment auditors to places that they can go, not just the places that they can't go. And that might help the success of that interaction. Make sure you identify areas that, because of their use, should be deemed non-public areas. Some of those examples include perhaps jail facilities, health facilities, sensitive utility facilities, control rooms, computer rooms, areas where viewing and recording would raise additional safety or security concerns. And then, as I mentioned, if you have public counters where you provide public services, one last planning tool is to think about how the First Amendment auditor visit lands with other customers who are there getting service at that counter, right? We can't and we don't want to, and it's a liability risk to tell the auditor they can't record, but be sensitive to the other customers. Think about signage or something that might be something you can direct the auditor to help create some separation between the auditor and other members of the public. Some of our entities, for example, have a piece of tape or a stripe on the ground. It says, please wait here until called, or have plexiglass screens between the counter service folks so that there's some separation and people feel like when they step forward to do their personal or private business that someone else is not set up to be able to easily intrude upon their transaction with the public officials. So those are some additional tips regarding physical space and staffing. With that, I'll turn it back to Kim to talk about some pool level considerations, things you might think about in terms of supporting your pool membership.
One of the focus areas that we do for pooling is our member focus. And with pools, we're there to support our local entity members. And as we've talked about through these slides in this presentation, that the most of the audits don't generate costly claims, but we have found they are emotionally generating for the reasons that we've discussed. You know, they are there to push buttons. So, you know, our goal is supporting the local entities and trying to give them the training to be prepared for these auditors, collaborate. Like I said, you know, we've collaborated nationally. We've done it regionally and statewide. Through this collaboration too, we've provided practical, pragmatic tools that we've talked about through this. We've provided talking points to assist some of the people sitting at those front desks. We have provided the signage for physical spaces in public entities, which, you know, separates, like Sam just talked about, the public and private spaces. We're continually modifying our trainings because the auditors are evolving and they try new things, and we try to keep up on it. We have constant communication with our members if they get a visit.